friends. I haven't made a BeingNess video in a while, but this is a new one. It's nice to see you all again. It's a bit of a weird format, talking to a screen and assuming that at some point people will be listening, but it's how the internet works. I've been debating topics, and what I want to talk about today is about teaching, because that's a big part of my life. And as much as I facilitate and lead things and, do circling, a lot of what I'm doing all the time is teaching. And I think there are ways to teach fairly well, and there are also ways to teach not so well. So I want to give a couple pointers, and I'm going to use the example of setting context for a circle, because I think there's a lot of things that are teaching that we really don't think about. I think we're teaching a lot of the time, even by our way of being. We're setting the context for how people can respond to us. So, teaching, there's 3 things that I think are important, or 4, and maybe others will come up as I give the example. But one is to teach from the moment, from what's here and now, what people can actually refer to, what's alive in their own experience. And similar to that, teach personally. Teach to the person or the people that you're talking about, or from your own experience. And teach specifically. So it works best if you can give an example of something. Basically, I think a lot of the time we work better when we can map something over to an experience that we're currently having. It's hard for our minds to think in generalizations and then generalize to specifics. So if I give you an example of, I want you to own your experience in a circle. That may mean just about anything. But if I say, I want you to own your experience, which means if you get angry at something I say, rather than telling me, don't do it that way, set context differently. A way to say it could be, I'm angry and scared because when you set context, I felt incomplete and like there wasn't going to be a chance to clarify, and then I felt powerless. And then you could even speak a little more specifically to experiences that they might have. Like for some of you, identifying what your experience is can be hard. And that's why we have a facilitator. My job is to help you get to the core of your own experience. And so I may choose to ask you a little bit deeper. If you tell me, I'm angry at you, you did it wrong, I may ask more of like, okay, you're angry, like, what about what I did made you angry? So by doing that example, essentially, I've turned the phrase, in a circle you have to own your experience, into an example that not only illustrates how you might own your experience, but also what the role of a facilitator is in guiding a circle. So when you get specific, like a lot opens up. And this is something where you may want to think about examples ahead of time, because for me, sometimes it's easy to pull things from the moment. It's kind of how my mind works. But for many of us, it might be easier to have some ideas beforehand, or think about past experiences you've been in, circles or otherwise, where something might come up, or think deeper about the words that we use. This is so, like, in talking about getting specific, there's meaning behind everything that we say. I'm trying to think of a good example right now. And of course I'm blanking, just when I need something. Okay, well, insert good example here on this. But you can take just about any word and define it. Even the idea of circling, like, what does that mean? It means a lot of different things to different people. You could get into a circle. See, example came. You could get into a circle, and some people have done, circling Europe, and they're expecting that we're going to sit in presence, and the facilitator is only going to speak when they feel like it's really alive in their experience. And other people have done integral center style, and they expect a clear context and guidance, and even within those schools, there's so much variety. So what words mean, what our expectations are, can seriously guide what we already think is going to happen, which is the value of having a context of teaching from the experience that we're about to have. So I think I'll give a little more of an example of how I might set context. And what I want you to do, and here's another teaching point. People, like I said, learn best when they can make something specific. And it helps if you invite people to imagine actual examples of where they might use something rather than passively receiving information, kind of like copying lines down from a blackboard. Not really useful. It's only useful if we think of what the application could be or even try it out. So after I speak this, I invite you to think about how you might set context in a circle or in a conversation with a friend. Like, what examples might you draw from what might occur for you when you do so? So I'm going to try setting a brief context for a circle in a way I might do it. Oh, okay. I'm speaking right now to a screen, and I'm going to be circling this screen, and presumably there are a lot of you out there listening. And in this moment, I'm going to be circling one of you. And the intent of doing this practice is to understand more about what the world is like through your eyes. Are you looking at me from your couch? Are you, watching this from your bed? Are you thinking about what I'm meaning or what I'm saying? And all of us, as we learn about the reality of the person we're circling, we get to imagine, if I were in their shoes, if I were sitting in my bed watching this right now, what would I be thinking, feeling, experiencing? And then we actually get to check. We get to see, okay, what is the world like in this other person's reality? And the beauty of this is, at least for me, these days more so, but in the past I've really gotten to see how my world compares to others. How the way I experience sadness or loss or rejection or joy is similar or different to how somebody else is. So in circling, at the most basic level, we're just sitting with each other. We're meditating on the experience of being together. We're getting curious about the present moment. We're having a group conversation. And a little deeper, we're actually exploring the nature of being human together. And I want you to feel into that for a moment. What is your experience of being you right now? Even in this moment, can you get curious? The sensation in my chest, what is it like to feel it? How is it to be myself right now? And what do I imagine others are feeling? Is it the same as mine? See if you can find some curiosity in that, maybe some wonderment. And in the circle, we're going to turn that on ourselves and each other. A little more information on what this looks like. We're going to have one conversation for the full time, so we're not going to butt off and talk to each other. We're going to keep our attention focused on the person that we're circling. You're welcome to ask questions about how their experience is, especially in the present moment. You're welcome to share impact of how you feel when you hear something they say. You're welcome to offer reflections of how they occur to you. And all of this is in service of getting more about what this person's world is like. And through that, getting more about what our own worlds are like. You might know it's going well if you feel closer to them, if you feel like you've gotten something new about them, if you feel like you've gotten something new about you. And as facilitator, my role is to help keep us on track, and the way I circle, to guide us towards the most closeness and understanding that we can have with each other. So in service of that, I might ask questions, I might pause things, I might ask you to clarify something that you've shared, and there's total open space for you to speak at any time. How does that sound to you? I'm curious if anyone needs something some clarification or more information before we play. So that's one example of setting context. And to break down a little bit, I feel a little self-conscious doing it, because I'm like, that may not even have been the ideal context setting, but I'm going to use it as an ideal example. When I was doing that, I was going from, what am I experiencing right now? Like, what do I feel inspired to transmit? I'm thinking about, what does this practice mean to me? Like, why would I be doing it in the first place? And for every example I'm giving, I'm trying to give a why. So like, why would I share impact? Why would I share reflection? Well, it's in service of getting this other person's world, or getting closer to my own. Why would I care about getting the other person's world? Well, one selfish motivation is I understand myself more. So for everything, like connecting it back to the intention, to why somebody might care, and offering specifics of, things I might do. I might pause. I might ask you something specific, and you're welcome to share. So making it personal, making it specific, trying to speak some to what your experience might be. If I'd gone a little further, I could say, for some of you, this may be very normal to sit and just be with someone else. Maybe that's something you do with your friends. You make eye contact, you ask questions, you share how it is to be together. For some of us, it may be a really different practice. Maybe even making eye contact is uncomfortable. Maybe you're worried about trespassing on somebody's privacy. And if that's the case for you, I welcome you to come from whatever space that you're in. Maybe you're quiet for the first part of the circle. Maybe you ask a lot of questions to see what it's like. Just be yourself in where you're at. That's the invitation. So you can speak more specifically to what someone might think, feel, or experience. I tend to set as much context as feels alive for me, in terms of like what has me more connected with what matters to me, like what has me convinced to do this, and a little bit on format, like what's it actually going to look like. The intent of context is to have people know how to play with themselves, how to play with each other, so that they can feel safe enough to step into the space. Not necessarily to give everybody all the information they're going to need, because a lot of that comes through transmission, but to have them feel relaxed enough that they have like a little bit of ground underneath them, and to have them feel connected to the intention of what's going on. So there's safety and there's enrollment. And the last thing is to check in. It's relational, and in teaching you don't always know how somebody's going to receive something. Most of the information often comes from feedback. I think the best lessons are where I say 2 sentences and the rest is discussion. And my goal, when a question comes up, isn't necessarily to answer it. It's actually to kind of crowdsource, to ask deeper, to make sure I understand it first, to give examples, to have us think about it together. Like, that's how we learn, is by thinking through things. And as a teacher, I want to give enough information that, you know where the ground is. But then once you have the ground, you can build your own structures on it. That's the ideal. At least that's how I work it. And that the cool thing about that is it also means that any piece of feedback or any question you get isn't a criticism, it's actually a gift. It doesn't necessarily mean you've given too little information. It means that somebody's engaged enough to want more. And the last thing I'll say is I find it really important to be congruent in my expression. And what I mean by that is, if I'm saying one thing and then doing another, for instance, if I say, I want to hear from all of you in a circle, and then I leave no space for someone else to talk, it's kind of uncomfortable. And even if people don't say it outright, they feel on a subtle level that something is off. And I just aim not to do that as much as possible. So hopefully I've been congruent in this video, or you'll give me feedback if not.